When it comes to the Elder Scrolls universe, it began very much like our own. In the beginning, there was nothing, then something very bizarre took place. Two beings, one representing creation and stability, and the other representing all that was opposed to that, set in motion a chain of events that gave us, the player, the very universe we have all grown very much attached to. Somewhere along the way, though, a very important figure was born and learned far more than he probably should have. He went on to trick his fellow Atada into creating the mortal plane known as Mundus in hopes to dethrone the being whose dreams are the very fabric of reality in the Elder Scrolls universe. And despite having his own heart ripped out and disappearing along the way, many have followed through on his plan, such as the living god Vivek of the Tribunal and the Emperor Tiber Septim, who would go on to be the god Talos. This being has many names: Shor, Lorkhan, Shazar, but many know him by his elvish name, Lorkhan, the god of betrayal and true freedom. Before I continue, my name is Infinity Break, and I am a YouTuber whose specialties lie in all things Elder Scrolls related, whether it be mods, theories, or lore. I also love discussing other series like Fallout and the Persona series, so if you like any of those, go check me out. I actually did the first part to this two-part video here, discussing Lorkhan and his ultimate plan for the Elder Scrolls universe, so go check that out if you haven't already. But here in this video, we will look at Lorkhan and the consequences his actions have had on the universe he helped establish. And while I've already established in the previous video how Lorkhan had helped create Nirn and all the diverse and interesting races that inhabit it, here we will start with how his actions will cause the end of Nirn as we know it.
Thanks Infinity for that quick breakdown of your video, which you can watch by clicking the little icon in the top right hand corner of the screen. But with the initial summary out of the way, I think it's about time that we delve into the topic of this video. And more so, why this video is titled the way it is. That being that this video, while also being a part 2 to Infinity Break's video on Lorkhan, is the successor to a video I made nearly 2 years ago about Lorkhan, the meaning of the Amaranth, and Vivek. Now a quick disclaimer before I get into the meat of the video, that being that the lore I talk about falls into a category known as Coda, wherein the lore, while not canon, may perhaps become canon, as all of it was written by a former Bethesda writer known as Michael Kirkbride, and almost all of it pretty much belongs to Bethesda. As such, please take everything with a heavy helping of salt. So then, how exactly did Lorkhan's plan come to fruition? Where we last left off, all the pieces of the puzzle had been put into place, but nothing was there to pull the trigger. That is to say, nothing was there to create the Amaranth. But it seems that while there is nothing there to seemingly begin the events that would create the new Amaranth, the process by which one would be created had begun eons ago. As with the creation of the various towers around Tamriel and the subsequent orbic wheel that they held up, there was also the breaking of those towers as time went on, with each tower falling one by one, game through game, until eventually there were no towers left. This part then is where lots of detective work comes into play, as currently not every tower has fallen in canon lore, but at the same time, in the events of the non-canonical Landfall and all of the former Bethesda writer Michael Kirkbride's writings, the wheel was broken by the Fifth Era. So then, clearly the towers that held up the wheel must have somehow deactivated. And of course by the hand of none other than Lorkhan, who via some very roundabout means, managed to deactivate them, with one major example being the plot of the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind. From here, the events of what would become known as Landfall would take place, wherein an ancient brass golem by the name of Numidium would escape a prison of time that it had been trapped in towards the end of the Fifth Era. But this golem was no ordinary animunculi. Rather, it was one with the power of none other than Lorkhan himself. And through a series of disastrous events, it not only wiped out almost all of the inhabitants of Nirn, but also destroyed the planet itself, which you can learn more about in the video in the top right hand corner of the screen. Luckily, however, the mortal races on Nirn were not about to give in to a godlike being so easily. Rather, they would create massive ships and leave for the moons, finding refuge in the Orbis as their heroes fought the brass god. But this escape was just that, an escape. For as the planet broke and the wheels of Lol were exposed, its inhabitants dug deep into the moon, hiding in massive underground caves, hoping that their heroes could defeat the Numidium. This battle against Numidium would go on for what seems like quite a long time, and eventually only the great houses and nobles would remember Nirn. This is also where the hero of our story enters, Jubal Sul, a Dunmer noble from a new house of the same name. His story, while far too complex to get into now, essentially entails how he plans to marry the daughter of another noble. The strange thing is, the further we get into the plot of his story, the more and more layered it gets. As not only must he prove himself worthy of marrying this woman by killing the brass god when not even the mightiest of Nirn's heroes could, but along the way, he encounters dead gods, metaphysical concepts, and perhaps, strangest of all, he convenes with Lorkhan as Talos and the wheels of law within the corpse of Nirn. This story, bar many connections and references, ultimately concludes with Jubal Sul giving up his hand so that he may speak with Numidium, killing it after his time with the aforementioned Talos Lorkhan, in a battle of words, wherein the Colossus dies by getting its head sliced off by a word that is never told from Sul's mouth. It's also here that the tale of Sul suddenly takes on greater meaning. As a close friend of his, one who helped him obtain such power to kill the brass god, and as such hopefully return to Nirn, did not know that the woman Sul was to marry was actually Vivek, and that the child they were to give birth to would be the new Amaranth. This plotline climaxes in Sul defeating his friend after killing many more Actong assassins, hinting that the creation of the Amaranth from the marriage was something that not even Sul knew about until his destiny had been fulfilled. This then leads us to the final part of Coda, wherein the wedding is held and all of the Dunmeri race is in attendance, witnessing as Lorkhan officiates and Sul and Vivek, in female form, marry, with the two creating a child made of flowers, who would bring about the next universe and finally save everyone from the broken cycle. From here on out, the story of the Elder Scrolls has essentially reached its end. But as with all things that seem to end, there's always something more to tell. In the case of the Elder Scrolls universe, Michael Kirkbride carries it forward into the Ninth Era, a point in time where any vaguely technological concepts from the main plot of Coda have been brought to their logical extreme, with things such as the vague mention of the Hist at Sul's bachelor party, or mind links becoming major parts of the universe. On top of this, it appears that by this point in time, the inhabitants of Nirn have far exceeded their roots, becoming an interplanetary civilization, with massive mining operations and things similar to it. All of this, however, is but a background to the story that Kirkbride attempts to tell, that being the story of an AI known as Kinmune, who unintentionally gets transported back in time and sets the events that lead to its creation, and even Landfall, into motion. Though I've already talked on end about the story of Kinmune, which, once again, if you want to know more about, you can click the little icon in the top right hand corner of the screen. This then is the story of Coda in its entirety, beginning with the creation of the dream, and finally ending with the dream being made into something that will never die. But while I did not delve all too greatly into the details of Sul's story, the implications, and perhaps more so, its meaning to the lore of the Elder Scrolls, is something that cannot easily be expressed or explained. So why not then, explore exactly what it all means, starting of course with the one who began it all, Lorkhan. As you may have noticed by now, Lorkhan makes a few appearances in the story of Coda, of which I briefly mention, as well as being a major point in the story of Kinmune. But why? Why does Lorkhan continually show up? Well, it's all fairly simple, as Lorkhan was the being who had wanted for mortals to break the cycle of the dragon god, and ultimately escape the void and non-existence. As to how far his influence had truly spread, well, it seems that not only was Lorkhan capable of making various historical figures unintentionally break down the towers that held together the Orbic Wheel, but through his influence, he also created Numidium, and in the end, helped Jubal Sul conquer his doubt and prepare for the fight that he was to have with Numidium, also that he could earn the hand of one that would help create the new Amaranth. That is to say then, that not only was Lorkhan capable of altering the fate of the universe, but also in bringing himself back from the pieces that he was broken into, returning as Talos, and finally achieving what he had set out to do all those ages ago. As such, while this may be a much larger and sort of overarching way of looking at the topic, it does not cover the fine details that allowed for one such as myself to reach the conclusions I did, and to even piece together the story as it was laid out. As Coda and many of the more extensive pieces of lore delving into Elder Scrolls metaphysics, be them canonical or not, are buried under layers of metaphors and references, and of course, an underlying message. The message being that in the end, we are the proprietors of our own story. As during the talk that Jubal Sul had with Talos Lorkhan, it is revealed that Talos could have been the one to bring about the next Amaranth, but in the end, he chose to believe the lie of reality and stay intertwined with it. In the case of Sul, however, he chose to accept that he wanted to be the hero, and that he was willing to do anything to achieve what he felt was the truth, sacrificing his hands even, so that he could truly speak. This also then wraps back around to Lorkhan and subsequently the fate of Vivek, where Lorkhan was the true mastermind, and understanding that he could not become the next Amaranth was Vivek's true destiny and fate, As Vivek's choice of willingly accepting that he could not be perfection, or the savior was what would lead to the true salvation that he had always sought. Salvation that even one who wanted it the most, and has set the plan in motion, could have never seen the consequences of. But then again, everything, no matter how small, has a cost. A cost that we can choose, and a choice that will always impact our lives. So with that all said, it seems like the video has finally come to an end. And what a journey it's been. Not only has the follow-up to a 2-year-old video finally been made, but at the same time, a fairly substantial collab has been done in the process. A collab that's allowed for me to delve more into the subject of Coda, and the overall progression of this channel, especially with content that I'll explore in the future. A huge thanks to Infinity Break for all the work he's done in this collab. His channel's got some really good stuff on it, and the content he produces is a lot like mine in many ways. So I'm sure you'll enjoy it greatly if you do choose to go check him out, which you should. And lastly, if you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, dislike it, and tell me why in the comments, please. And if you really liked it, then perhaps subscribe. Anyways, it's been a great experience making this video. Makes me feel like a chapter's finally been closed on the channel, and I hope you'll stick with me on the next one. So until next time, this is Kuyo, signing off.